welcome to the October 2023 edition of City Connection. City Connection is a live television program from Community Media Center, offering the community the opportunity to hear about efforts from City Hall and beyond. With the Community Media Center, I'm your host, Allison Donahue. Today on City Connections, we will be joined by the Assistant Economic Development Director, Jono Klooster. I will talk with Jono about his role with the city and what the Assistant Economic Development Director does in Grand Rapids. In the second half of the show, we provide time for our guests to take your questions and comments. To take part in the conversation, you can send your questions or comments to cityconnection@grcmc.org, through Twitter @GRTVAccess, or by commenting at the GRTV Facebook page. City Connection, a collaboration between Community Media Center and the City of Grand Rapids, is broadcasting live today, October 2, 2023, here on Community Access Television Channel 24, and live streaming at therapidian.org and at GRTV's Facebook page. We will be rebroadcasting this program throughout the month on cable GRTV's Channel 25, and now in the studio with me is the Assistant Economic Development Director, Jono Klooster. Hi, Jono, how are you?
I'm well, Allison. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome to the GRTV studio for this month's episode of City Connection. So glad to have you here. To get us started, many people at home might not know what the Assistant Economic Development Director does. So can you fill us in on what your current role is and the primary responsibilities associated with it?
Sure. So economic development looks different in every community. In Grand Rapids, we have a focus on three main areas, and those are business development, business retention and expansion is one area. We focus on real estate development, and then we work in our neighborhood business corridors as well. My primary focus over the years has been on the real estate component of that, but I have been around for 13 years in the department, and I've worked at various times in all of those areas. So every day is a little bit different. We get to work with a wide variety of stakeholders, businesses, nonprofits, residents, neighborhood associations. Every day is different, and that's what makes the job exciting.
And starting this week, you'll be stepping in as Interim Economic Development Director effective October 4. Mm-hmm. So can you fill us in on what this new position will entail and what people can expect from your leadership in that role? Sure.
So, yeah, as you mentioned, we do have our director, Jeremiah Gracia, is departing. His last day is Wednesday, and so I'll be stepping in as the acting director during that time. I think the main thing I can tell you is that what people can expect is stability. We have a lot going on right now, and I intend to make sure that we are continuing to march down the path with all the initiatives and programs and projects that we're working on. There are a lot of them. We do have a good team behind us as well that'll be supporting us. But I think the main message is that in the short term, people should expect huge differences in their experience with the Economic Development Office. They should expect that we will maintain consistency and stability and predictability in our operations going forward.
Predictability is a great thing to expect. Yeah. Can you also tell us about your role with the Grand Rapids Brownfield Redevelopment Authority and fill us in on what that authority is and what it does in terms of revitalizing underutilized or contaminated properties in the city?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where a lot of the work I do is with our Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. So for context, the Economic Development Department is a city department. We're a relatively small department with 7 people, and we do manage a whole bunch of authorities. So I think we'll talk a little bit about a few of those later on. The Brownfield Redevelopment Authority is one of those. So that's a quasi-governmental entity that is established by the City Commission. So it's a board. We have board members that are appointed by the City Commission as well that provide oversight to that. I serve as the executive director of the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority and have been in that role since 2019. I really enjoy it. That program is one that we've utilized a lot in Grand Rapids to achieve a lot of results. So For those that aren't familiar with it, as you mentioned, Allison, it is a program that works to support the revitalization of lots of different properties. They may be functionally obsolete buildings that need to be either go through a significant rehabilitation or potentially be torn down for a new use. Functionally obsolete, they may be contaminated from a prior use. Historic resources are also properties that qualify for the brownfield program, so that means that it has some historical significance. We really enjoy working on those projects where we can sort of bring buildings back to their, the historic nature of them from their obsolete condition. And recent amendments to that legislation, the brownfield redevelopment legislation, have really expanded opportunities for us to be involved in housing projects. So we have supported many different housing projects, but sometimes it's been a bit of fitting a square peg into a round hole, and we aren't really able to achieve everything that we would like to. Recent legislative amendments have really opened that up, and so we're in the process of working on policy with our board and program guidelines and making sure that we can use that program to meet a lot of the challenges related to the housing supply in Grand Rapids. So we hope to roll that out this year. It is a partnership with the state. In this instance, it's with the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, so we're working collaboratively with them to define the program guidelines. But I think we expect, and the public can expect, a lot more from the Brownfield Authority going into the future. So if people haven't really, if that sounds kind of, I feel like I've heard about the Brownfield Authority, but what does that really mean? It really ranges from projects like the size of a studio park development right downtown, which is a whole block of various uses, down to rehabilitation of churches that aren't being used for churches anymore and turning those into, for instance, apartment buildings, right? So it can range in size and scale. There are brownfield projects that we've worked on across the city, in every quadrant of the city.
And you said those legislative changes have kind of opened up opportunities. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, at a high level, the way I like to explain the brownfield program in 1 minute, if I only have 1 minute, is that a brownfield program has to be on property that qualifies for the program, and then it has to have expenses that qualify under the program as well. So the eligible properties have been expanded to just include pretty much every housing property in the city. So that's an expansion of properties that can qualify for the program. And then a lot of the costs that can be included in a brownfield program have been expanded as well. The program really started as a cleanup program way back in the 90s. So this was to deal with largely industrial properties, right, that had a history of uses that may not have been regulated appropriately, very early on, right? Mm-hmm. And it's been expanded over the years many times, and this is just another one of those expansions. But it's been expanded to really be able to support a lot of urban redevelopment projects. So these expansions in terms of eligible activities are related to providing housing at sort of this middle income. There are a lot of programs, not enough, but there are a lot of programs targeted at lower income affordable housing. And then there's the market rate, right? And there's, I think we recognize and have a lot of data to support that there are needs across the spectrum for housing. And so this is now a tool that we can use pretty effectively, I believe, to provide some of that middle income housing for those households that maybe can't afford market rate, but might be making a little bit too much money to qualify for some of the programs that exist today.
And we've just talked quite a bit about that project, but are there any other, in that program, are there any other ongoing projects or initiatives that the residents of Grand Rapids can expect to see in the next year or two or get excited about?
Yeah, a lot of things we work on, interesting, we'll see them in front of the city commission, and then they don't get built for a year, they don't get finished for a couple years. So, one project we've been working on for a long time is the Factory Yards project. So this is the first project to qualify under the Transformational Brownfield Program in Grand Rapids. And that's on Godfrey Avenue, south of Market. So if people are familiar with that area, it's really a lot of old warehouses right now, industrial buildings that have been very underutilized for a long time. So we've been working with the property owner to help them convert those buildings to a variety of uses. So we should see about 475 apartments altogether when that project's done. A food hall with about a dozen local vendors, a lot of commercial space, both for retail and future office development, and a lot of amenities to the site as well. That's right next to the Oxford Trail, and so we'll be able to make connections to the Oxford Trail there. And we've been working on that for a long time. We're hoping that construction on that starts this year, and that means that we'll see some of the components of that project be wrapped up probably in about a year and a half, maybe 2 years from now. So that's been very exciting. You know, the changes to the Brownfield program is an ongoing effort, so I think that I can't identify specifically the projects we'll see from that quite yet, but I think we'll have a lot of exciting opportunities there. And then, you know, recently we just wrapped up Tech Week in Grand Rapids. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but that was coordinated to align with Art Prize, so it was sort of complementary to the activity that we saw in Art Prize. It's really an effort that we worked on with partners of ours at the Right Place and others to sort of build the awareness and elevate the profile of Grand Rapids as a place where high technology companies can come and be successful, but also entrepreneurs have a place to get the resources that they need for their high technology business in Grand Rapids as well.
Is that a priority for the city's economic development program, is expanding where we are in the tech industry?
Absolutely. Our initiative there, so I talked about some of the boards we manage, that's another one. We have a Smart Zone, Local Development Finance Authority, and that's a board similar to the Brownfield. It's established by the City Commission. It has board members that are appointed to that board. That board's efforts recently have been coordinated with Spartan Innovations, which is an arm of, it's affiliated with Michigan State University that has a large and growing presence in Grand Rapids. And then with Start Garden as well, which is another organization downtown that's focused on helping entrepreneurs start and grow their business. So that's been a great partnership with those two entities. I think we've seen a lot of good results. And the goals there are really to grow and diversify the technology sector in Grand Rapids. Yeah.
And we just have a minute or two left, but
right.
I would love to hear what drives you in this role. Are there any successes or milestones that you really hang your hat on, and why you keep trying to make Grand Rapids more economically successful?
Sure. I think there are so many things, Allison. I already talked about the diversity of the job, right? Being involved in, projects as diverse as like the Fulton Street Farmers Market and then Studio Park and everything in between. There are great people that work at the city, so it's really a pleasure to work cross-departmentally with my counterparts there, and being able to say you're working to improve the economic conditions of residents of Grand Rapids on a daily basis is, I think anybody would be excited about that.
Great. Well, it's time for our first break now. When we come back, we will continue our conversation with Jono Klooster, so stay tuned and we will be right back.
For over 30 years after humble beginnings as a public access TV station, the Community Media Center has grown to be an active, multi-platform media and technology assistance organization, encouraging and enabling our community to push their creative boundaries. We power a variety of resources, including a music-centered community radio station, WYCE, a community venue with stage and screen at Wealthy Theater, citizen-driven journalism with the Rapidian, a web development team empowering local nonprofits, an education department that trains and broadens students' minds, and a free speech public access television studio, GRTV, where it all began. By introducing audiences to new voices and ideas, we enhance community engagement and create connections between artists and audiences, enriching our city's cultural offerings. We empower and collaborate with platforms and resources accessible to all and used by all. Every free democratic society depends on media, accessible to the community and uncensored by government. The Community Media Center continues this work for the media landscape of today and tomorrow. These platforms and services empower our neighbors to tell their stories and explore the richness of culture that Grand Rapids has to offer. Connect, discover, learn, create, and share. The Grand Rapids Community Media Center.
Hi there, and welcome back to City Connections. We're here with our guest, Assistant Economic Development Director, Jono Klooster, talking about some of the big plans that we have here in the city coming up. One of those is something that's been ongoing. The City of Grand Rapids recently approved the potential sale of a number of empty homes earlier this year to renovate and to turn into affordable housing. So can you shed some light for our viewers on where that project is right now, or those projects, their potential impact on the local community, and how it fits into the broader vision of more affordable housing in the city?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. There have been a couple approvals recently, but I'll tell you generally about the program. So we have a relationship with the State Land Bank Authority in Michigan, and through that relationship, they manage about 60 properties in the city of Grand Rapids. They manage them, meaning they mow the lawn and shovel the snow and take care of those properties, but the city takes applications for the redevelopment of those properties, and we evaluate those. So a couple years ago, we did work with the City Commission and approved a new sort of program related to those properties. So people can apply. Actually, those properties are all available, listed on our website currently. And there's a process by which anybody can apply to acquire one of those properties. You are going to have to propose a housing project. Most of the lots are vacant, so that means a new construction project. You are going to have a plan that can be approved by the city in terms of the type of home and the zoning requirements. And you're going to have to show us that you have a plan to finance that as well. The program does prioritize affordable housing. So if we get competing applications, if one application is for an affordable housing project, we will prioritize that, right? And we'll try to find additional financing for that project as well. So recently we did approve a couple things. Habitat for Humanity, which has been a longtime partner of ours, was just approved to acquire 4 properties. Those are all new homes that they'll be building. And their program is that they do sell to households earning 80% of the area median income or below. We're also working with a private development group, House to Homes Renovation, and they're purchasing for existing homes. So these are homes that are in really poor condition, really needing to be fully renovated before they're safe and healthy places for people to move into. And they're also going to be providing affordable housing. So selling those homes to households who are earning 80% or below of the area median income. So we really hope to see more activity there. Like I said, those properties are all available today. Like I said, you do have to have a plan. You can't just buy them. There's a process. But I think so far we've seen some pretty good success, even with the challenges in the market that we're experiencing right now in terms of interest rates and construction costs. I think we're seeing some pretty good success.
With those homes that were purchased by House to Homes, could you tell us what parts of the city those houses are in, if you know?
Yeah, I don't have that offhand. We do have, those 60 properties are spread throughout the city. They're mostly in what we would call our traditional neighborhoods, so the nearer to downtown neighborhoods. And so if I had those addresses, I could tell you.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about, so based on some data from 2013, so a couple years ago now, presented in the Equitable Economic Development and Mobility Strategic Plan, it states that out of the nation's 52 largest cities, Grand Rapids ranks second to last in economic outcomes for Black Americans, gauged by homeownership, median household income, and entrepreneurship. Can you talk to us about how the department is addressing and prioritizing economic growth, especially and specifically for the Black community in Grand Rapids?
Sure. I think there are a couple things I can refer to. Number one, as you mentioned, that's 2013 data. That report hasn't been reproduced, so I think we don't have, all we have is 2013, which is a decade ago. Since that time, we have gone through and developed our strategic plan for our department, the Equitable Economic Development and Mobility Strategic Plan. I apologize for the long name, but and so we've identified a couple strategies in there to counter that, right? So I think we recognize that a lot of things you do, and especially in economic development, when you're working with the city and different programs, can be pretty complicated. Sometimes we have an opportunity to simplify those things, but not always when it's a state law that tells us we have to implement a program a certain way, right? And so we recognize that we need to be more transparent and engaged in the community, being able to share our story and the opportunities that people have to work with us. Those homes are a great example, right? So how can we make sure that information is available to everybody, not just the people who know where it is, right? And not assume that there aren't opportunities there for everybody. So I think we've placed a bigger effort on communications since we've completed our strategic plan. So we have much more information out there on our website. It's much easier to digest. We've gone through and tried to simplify our application processes wherever possible, realizing that sometimes we just accidentally create barriers for people. And if we look more intentionally at why we're asking for something, sometimes the answer is, yeah, we don't need to ask for that, so let's not. And then we do a better job, I think, of getting out into the community in places that we haven't historically been. Where we have opportunities, for instance, to work with partners to identify specific outcomes that we're looking for. The Smart Zone, the board that I referenced earlier, is a great example. We're working with Stark Garden and Spartan Innovations. Can we make sure that together we have a common understanding that we're going to try to not just grow the tech sector in Grand Rapids, but to diversify it as well, right? And what are the intentional strategies that we can do to make sure that we're not creating any barriers that don't need to be there for individuals. So those are a couple examples. I think just tracking data too along the way. So we're measuring, are we working with first-time developers, or are we working with developers that have a lot of experience and know the systems and don't need as much help from us? Are we able to help provide guidance and assistance to those that might need it a little bit more? Yeah.
A big part of the Economic Development Department's strategic plan is to build equity into the city's economy, like we're just talking here. And you mentioned a few, but could you tell us more about some of the key strategies or programs the city is implementing to make economic development and mobility more accessible and equitable to everyone?
Absolutely. I think one of the greatest successes I think that I can point to over the past couple of years that came directly out of our strategy is a program that we designed and developed, and we refer to it as the Inclusion Plan. So one commonality for most things we work on, kind of regardless of which board or program it is, there's usually a construction project involved. So recognizing that that's true, we looked intentionally at, okay, we have an opportunity in that industry, in the construction industry, to make an impact. What should we be doing? So we developed this inclusion plan in partnership with our steering committee from our strategic plan, which is a very diverse group of individuals representing organizations and neighborhood associations, and then also stakeholders and other experts. And basically what we're doing is every time we have a project, we're asking the applicant for that project to take an intentional look at their construction, working with their general contractor to increase access to opportunity for diverse subcontractors. So this is very specific to the construction industry, but we recognize that that's a great opportunity. So I think the plan has worked pretty well. We've implemented it beginning in 2021, and every project we've worked on since that time has submitted an inclusion plan. It's a little bit hard to talk about the numbers, but I'll do my best to sort of break it down here. We've got about 30 plans. The applicants for those plans have identified about $60 million of what we would call our aspirational goals. Aspirations are good, but we also want to know what the actual outcomes are. So we've got outcomes from 11 projects right now. That's our first really report of, okay, everybody's bought in, we're seeing good participation and commitments, but is it following through to actual outcomes? And with 11 projects, the goal for those 11 projects was about $22 million, and we got to just over 20 million. So not 100%, but I think 20 million out of 22 million commitments for the first report from a new program. We feel pretty good about that, and that we have a lot of opportunity to continue building that program, continue building awareness. It gets easier over time. We have more shared sort of goals with the people we're working with. And I think that's, that's one of the great successes I can point to coming out of our strategic plan. Yeah.
Great. And I believe we're about to go to our second break here shortly, but I want to ask before we do that about the city's emphasis on our 6 corridor improvement authorities.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about what that looks like and the importance of investing in these community business districts?
Absolutely. I'll try to be brief for time. But we do have 6 of them. These are, again, boards with appointed board members. They cover most of the commercial areas of the city. Their investments are largely in streetscape improvements, facade improvements, and public art. And I think the value of that is we're creating great places where people want to be, and that makes the city attractive overall. So if we can have a great downtown and great neighborhood corridors across the whole city, I think that's going to be beneficial not just to the residents, but to those businesses and people that want to start businesses in those neighborhood corridors.
Definitely makes our city more walkable.
Yeah.
So we're about to head into our second break now. So when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Jono Klooster and take questions from those of you watching along at home. So stay tuned and we will be right back.
The Wealthy Theater is Grand Rapids' local movie theater and performance center. Since 1998, it has been a host to nationally touring music groups, local theater performances, and a variety of community events. Today, the Wealthy Theater is not only a landmark community treasure with historic significance, but a pioneer in the infusion of technology and traditional theater. Underneath the elegance and classic sensibility that defines Wealthy Theater, there is a matrix of new technologies. The theater is completely digital and outfitted with cameras and microphones for concerts, theater and comedy troupes, speakers and lecturers, and so much more. Experience all that Wealthy Theater has to offer. And bring a friend. Be surprised by the Wealthy Theater.
WYCE is a world of music. We aim to shine a light on underserved musical artists in a non-commercial format with no advertisements. Volunteers come in to create personalized music programming that broadcasts over the air at 88.1 FM to West Michigan and via the internet to listeners all over the world. These listeners sponsor our efforts, keeping WYCE independent and community-owned. Musicians use the station to broaden their audience and build support for their latest projects by submitting their music to be included in our broadcast and performing live in studio. Businesses find their customers through underwriting, nonprofits inform the community to their mission, and listeners stay informed about local events. We believe that music is a powerful force that creates quality relationships in our community, that speaks to our emotions, and provides the soundtrack to our lives.
Welcome back to City Connection. I'm your host, Allison Donahue. I'm joined here with Assistant Economic Development Director Jono Klooster, and we are at the part of the show where we get to answer questions from you, from the folks at home. So the first question that we have for you today, Jono, is from Bianca. They want to know, why did the old Economic Development Director leave?
Well, I'm not sure I can speak for Jeremiah. He is going back to the place that he calls home in Ohio for a new opportunity. What I can tell you is that it's been great to have Jeremiah here for 3.5 years. I think we've made more progress over that time than in a lot of really important areas, and so we're sad to see him go. But I think for the full story, you'd have to ask Jeremiah.
That's fair. We have another question here from Mo. Mo wants to know, how is the city protecting green spaces as it encourages economic development?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there's a lot of different answers to that, I think. Obviously, our Parks Department has a big role in that and is making, hopefully, your viewers have recognized the many investments that have been made in parks since the voters approved enhanced millages for those. So that's one key component. Another is when we're working on economic development, this is a collaboration with planning. There are requirements for green space and development, right? And so it varies depending on what property and what type of project you're talking about, but there are requirements that prioritize green space and make sure that everybody's doing their part to not create just areas throughout the city, but that unique areas like parks, but that runs throughout the whole city. I would guess that every department at the city could tell you a story of how they're working on that, from planting more trees to green infrastructure on city infrastructure projects. And in economic development, one of the roles we play is also, it's not as well known, but we do help manage the city's real estate portfolio. And so, in the last year, I've helped the Parks Department acquire property. The most recent one was in Plaza Roosevelt on Cesar E. Chavez Avenue, formerly Granville Avenue, next to the project that's been developed there over the last couple of years. So we'll have another acre of parkland there. Another one was on the northwest side that's currently green space, so we acquired that to preserve it as green space. So I think it's a sort of all of city effort to make sure that we're all doing our part, but those are just a couple examples.
Great, so you're not just buying up houses and
Nope.
buildings, you're buying up green space too.
That's right.
Perfect. So this question is from Tracy. She lives in the Creston neighborhood. And they said, I've seen a lot of city investment over the past couple years. What is the city doing to prevent gentrification as they invest in our neighborhood?
Yeah, that's a challenging one for sure, because there's so much tied up into that. I can tell you that one of the most important things that we do in economic development when we're working on a project is work to engage with neighborhood associations. So Tracy's writing in from Creston. We have a really good relationship with the Creston Neighborhood Association, both with the director and their land use committee. So anytime we're working on anything there, one of our first stops is to the neighborhood association. Now I know that's just one venue, and it's easier for some people to engage in that than others. So you know, our efforts related to affordable housing are another component of that. So I talked about our strategy when we're selling property to prioritize affordable housing. This new brownfield program is intentionally designed to provide housing at below market rate in development projects. So where we would have projects that might be all market rate, I think now we have an opportunity to work collaboratively with developers to include some market rate. And maybe the best answer to this question is that I've talked about affordable housing and this middle income housing. Usually those conversations are about rental housing. The new brownfield program, I think, provides a lot of opportunity to help with home ownership as well. And really home ownership is one of the best strategies to deal with avoiding gentrification, right? If people own their home, then they have choices to make, whether or not they want to stay. When the rent goes up, that's less of a choice, right? So I think we'll see a prioritization based on the conversations we've had with our board so far. I think we'll see a prioritization for more affordable housing, home ownership through the brownfield program than we have in the past.
This question's from Peter. Peter said, I heard the city is looking at easing the ability for homeowners to change their single-family homes to house multiple families to alleviate housing issues. I'm worried about the amount of traffic and lack of parking that will come with that in my neighborhood. More of a comment, but do you have anything to say to Peter?
Yeah, I do. And I'm going to mostly defer to conversations that are ongoing at the Planning Commission and the City Commission level. So the commenter is correct. There is an ongoing conversation about zoning reform, which includes a couple different key aspects. And there have been numerous public conversations at the Planning Commission and the City Commission. It's really our Planning Department and Planning Commission that's leading that work. And I can say that those, it's a weighing of pros and cons, and those concerns that Peter I apologize.
Peter asked, yeah.
Peter did ask the question. Those concerns are being discussed. So I think there's videos that can be watched to get more insight into that, and there will be more coming in the future and opportunities for different perspectives. Yeah.
This question is from Brandon. How does the city qualify or quantify affordable housing?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I really do like that question, as difficult as it is, because it really requires you to just get to the point, right? I think different people use that term to refer to different things. When I'm talking about my work in the brownfield program, I would use the term income restricted, meaning we're going to support projects that have rent limits, and in order to live there, you will have to earn below a certain income based on your family size. So whether somebody believes that's affordable and another person doesn't, to me, just to be clear, it's an income restricted unit. So I think, historically, affordable housing that term has been used for programs that serve households earning 60% of the area median income and below, and income restricted might be a term that applies to something different than that. So, I'm not going to provide a definition of affordable housing for my programs because another program might use a different definition. So I'm just going to be specific that we're talking about income restricted, meaning it's for households below a certain income, and then the rent or the purchase price of that home is going to be affordable to that family, meaning it costs them less than 30% of their monthly income.
And that income level is set by project? Each individual project would have a
That
different?
income, they could, and they could have a variety. So I think, in one sense, I think projects that provide a diversity have a lot of benefits associated with them. So a range of income, household income level. And yeah, we could absolutely be working on projects that have a mix of market rate and below market rate at various price points. Yeah.
I have a question here from Kim. Kim wants to know, how did the city acquire the vacant properties that are for sale? Was it through foreclosure or was it purchased from previous owners? There's a lot of them.
Yeah, there are a lot of them. The easy answer to that is through tax foreclosure. The more complicated answer is that we acquired them from the Kent County Land Bank when that board was dissolved. So we used to have a partnership. I talked about our partnership with the State Land Bank. We used to have a partnership with the Kent County Land Bank. But when that agency was closed, then the properties transferred to the State Land Bank Authority, and that's when we negotiated our agreement with them. The majority of them, as I said, are vacant lots, and that's almost always been true. So they mostly have been acquired through tax foreclosure, which is different than mortgage foreclosure. These are properties where taxes hadn't been paid for many years. That's generally where those properties came from. Yep.
Okay. I have a question from George. George wants to know, is there a project that we have passed up or didn't quite happen that you would like to see?
Oh, man. That's a great question. I think we make happen what we want to see happen. So I'd like to say no, but my memory is getting worse as I get older. In general, I'd love to see more, I'll categorize it. The answer is I'd love to see more small-scale projects. And sometimes we aren't able to provide the resources necessary for those because of the size of them. They're just not quite big enough to qualify for some of the programs. And even if they do qualify, sometimes the cost benefit isn't there. But I'm really excited again because I think the changes to the Brownfield program are going to really allow us to make, we'll have a lot of opportunities to work on those small scale. And so I mean like, a 10-unit housing project, for instance, or even a 4-unit townhome type project. I think we'll have a lot of opportunities to work on those that before these changes just didn't quite fit with the program.
Okay, so you're excited to welcome in some more smaller projects.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, we have one more question. Actually, we might hold it for after the break because I think it's about time to wrap it up before we go to break now. But we will be right back after this break, and we have some more questions from all of you at home for Jono Klooster here. So we'll see you in a minute.
How do you build a strong local food economy? Meet Chris. Chris is opening Osteria Rosa, a locally sourced Italian restaurant in a building brought back to life by 616 Development. But he doesn't know any local farmers to supply him with food year-round. This is Melissa. Melissa runs the Fulton Street Farmers Market and publishes a long list, even in the dead of winter, of available produce, meats, bakery goods, and more on the Rapidian. This is Amy. Amy wants to do more to support the farmers and her local food economy. Amy talks to Melissa, who introduces her to farmers at the Fulton Street Farmers Market, and Amy, in turn, publishes their stories, also on the Rapidian. Chris hears about the Rapidian and now has access to a local grocery list and information that he needs to make connections with local farmers. He feeds his patrons with local food year-round. Connections multiply, meals are shared, a stronger local food economy is built.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to City Connection. I am here with Jono Klooster answering your questions about what's going on in the city. If you have questions, there's still time to send them in. You can email us at cityconnection@grcmc.org and ask some questions. But to start us off with this final section of the show, we've got a question from Sean. Sean wants to know, how does the city decide what properties to purchase or sell?
Yeah, there's no one answer to that. If we're purchasing a property for city use, that's usually an independent property-specific evaluation based on our needs at the time. If the question is more about those residential properties that we talked about, then that's just based on application. So as I said, those are available now. I also said previously that you do have to have a plan that can be seen through to completion, including financing. But realistically, those are available, and if somebody wants to apply to purchase those, they can do so, and we'll work with them on their application and see whether there's a project there.
How many applications would you say on average the city gets a year for those properties?
We've been taking applications, I think, for just over a year now.
Okay.
And I think don't hold me to it, but I think we've sold 13 properties. Probably more than half of those have been to nonprofits. I mentioned Habitat, but also to like Link Up, for instance, that have a history of developing affordable housing. So we'd love to get more applications, but that's been the volume so far.
Okay. Do you have like an estimate on how many applications you've received?
Most of our applications, so it usually starts with a phone call, which is good, because we don't want people submitting applications thinking they're going to get be able to buy the property tomorrow. Obviously, we want to sell these properties for residential development, and so we have an obligation to make sure that happens before we sell the property. So we don't get many applications that we have to sort of turn away or say they're incomplete. So maybe a handful we've gotten, but we try to work with people to make sure they have good expectations, so they're not wasting their time too.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Wei has a question. Does the city acquire or sell commercial space? And if an organization or business buys a building from the city, what are some of the expectations that come with the use of that space?
Generally, the answer is no. We don't do that. Like I said, when we're buying property, I mentioned two, right? We bought Parks property, right? That's for a park. We also recently have acquired some property for the fire department. There's an area of the city that's very underserved in terms of fire response time. It's well known. So we acquired some property for a new fire station. So those are the times when we're buying property. We don't have property generally that we are using for commercial enterprises. Yeah.
I think I might have some more questions for you here. Can you discuss any recent collaborations between the city and private entities that are aimed at stimulating economic growth in Grand Rapids?
Yeah, I mean, they're just kind of all the time. We're working in partnership with a lot of different organizations. I mentioned Tech Week. recently, which is exactly that, intended to stimulate the tech economy in Grand Rapids. We have a partnership that we've had for a couple years with the Grand Rapids Area Chamber of Commerce and Downtown Grand Rapids, Inc. for our retail business specialists. So we have a contracted individual working to support our retail businesses. Some of those are in our corridor improvement authorities as well. Other collaborations, I mean, I feel like most of what we do is a collaboration with the private sector, whether that's a private development project, whether that's a real estate development transaction, whether that's a business expansion. We're usually working with a business or a nonprofit organization to kind of bring all the resources we can to each individual project.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking my question on
Sure.
that one. Let's get back to questions from the audience. This one's from Bear. How does the city encourage the development from low-paying jobs to higher-paying and more skilled jobs? Do they help find training opportunities?
Yeah, our work, so I think what Bear's referring to is, commonly referred to as like workforce development, right? Upskilling people to advance in their careers. Good paying jobs are really important, right, to the economic success of Grand Rapids. Our efforts in workforce development are largely collaborations with other organizations. So, whether it be supporting construction trades training to fill the need in the construction industry, whether it's bringing resources that are really at the state level or the regional level, so that employers don't see barriers to training their workforce, right? So there are lots of opportunities for state funding for training programs. So early on in the program, I mentioned our business retention sort of initiatives, and that's just going out and meeting with companies and making sure that they're not experiencing any barriers that we might be able to help address to their success and growth, and therefore their employees' success and growth in Grand Rapids. And so when an employee is identifying, a need for upskilling their employees to both meet the business needs, but also to increase the wages at their location, there's usually resources that we can bring to that in collaboration with. Oftentimes it's the Right Place, our regional economic development partner, and or the state of Michigan's economic development group too.
This is a question from Jenny. An important tool for building tech jobs in GR is having an educated workforce. We have a number of colleges in the area to do that, but so many students move away. What does the city do to keep students here when apartment prices are so high and starting wages are so low?
Well, tech, it's a great question, Jenny. The tech industry, I think, in general, can probably be characterized by higher than average paying jobs. I know that that's not always true, but that is one of the reasons why that is a focus industry, right? Because it's generally a higher paying industry. It's also an industry that's just sort of pervading every other industry, right? I've heard some people say, are you a tech company? No, I'm a manufacturer. Well, you have a lot of technology in your company, right? So I think the identification of education and the fact that a lot of people will come and get educated in Grand Rapids and then go elsewhere is absolutely something that we need to sort of stem the tide on. That's I think one of the ways that we can do that is build effective partnerships between the educational institutions and our employers in Grand Rapids. That's a collaborative effort, really, again, with the Right Place as a big partner there, and the work of our Smart Zone in collaboration with Michigan State University and Stark Garden. But absolutely, we want to be doing everything we can to, if somebody's coming here to get educated, we feel like we kind of have a right to them, that we hope we're building a great place where people want to live. And in order to do that, they got to be able to afford to live here too.
This question is from Harold. Harold wants to know, or Harold's saying, I just attended a neighborhood association meeting where a police officer attended, and he said that they are struggling to hire officers. But even if they were at capacity, they still wouldn't have enough budget to meet their needs. Has the city considered working with third-party policing options to help close the gap?
I think I'm going to have to defer on that question.
That might be a 311.
Yep.
Call the city. If we had the mayor here this month, she'd been able to answer, but it's not your fault. So we'll take a different question. How about from Marge? Marge asks, there are initiatives on the state level to pass film incentives. If that happens, how is GR going to attract film productions to the side of the state and not just Detroit?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'll be honest that we haven't really engaged in that locally quite yet. I know those incentives used to be out there, and then they went away, and now there's conversation about bringing them back. If and as that seems like it might get some legs and become a reality, I think we'll look at it and evaluate, sort of to a previous question, like is that an industry that we feel like we have a competitive advantage? It would seem like that's worth considering for sure. And does it provide the type of jobs that we want here? So I think there are some good companies in Grand Rapids in the film industry. I'm aware of that. And so we'll probably start by talking to them and seeing what opportunities they see and whether we can work collaboratively to sort of get our local effort aligned towards successful outcomes for Grand Rapids companies and residents. It does align with our goal of creating a sort of an attractive place, right? Generally, films are shot in locations that people have an affinity towards, and if we're a place like that, I think we're doing our job well.
Yeah, it's also really interesting to see what industries people at home who are watching are interested in seeing grow here in Grand Rapids. Film industry is one of them.
Yep.
Last question. So how, and this is a question from Thomas, how is the city encouraging development downtown? I've lived there for 20 years and I've seen lots of change, but there are still areas lacking in development and are scary to live in or even walk in.
Well, I think how do you encourage development in general anywhere, right? Development's going to happen where development is perceived that it will be successful, right? And so development's going to happen in areas where people want to be. People want to be in places that are walkable, that have a lot of amenities, that have options for people of all different backgrounds and income levels, that have diversity of all types, that have quality infrastructure. And so really, whether it's downtown or anywhere else, I think the question is, what are we doing to make sure that every part of the city has as many of those sort of amenities as possible so that we're seeing the investments in rehabilitating vacant buildings or neighborhoods where there might be a certain amenity or two that's lacking, where the private market will come in and say, we see an opportunity there, and we think that we can be successful in doing that. Now, we have programs, of course, depending on the project, that can help make a project and development financially feasible. But generally, those projects are going to only happen if they're financially feasible and the investors believe that the project's going to be successful there, meaning it's in a place where people want to be.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for tuning into City Connection. Thank you, Jono, for being on our show and joining us today and filling us in on all the different types of economic development we might be seeing here in Grand Rapids coming soon. So until next time, take care, Grand Rapids.